It was 4 years ago while married that I looked into the eyes of a stranger and had this kind of epiphany and wake up call where I realized that A, this is what connection is actually supposed to feel like. And B, wow, I have been convincing myself that the 9 year relationship that I've been in is something different from what it actually is. It's, yeah, a terrifying thing to go to this person that you care about and say, here's the truth. And I also realized that I think the biggest growth edge for me was learning to tolerate the discomfort of someone else being disappointed in me
Yeah.
and learning
Mm.
that I'm going to have to disappoint people so
Mm.
that I do not disappoint myself.
Hello there, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of the Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your destination, your oasis to be all things just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And today we are braving a soul nourishing one. We're braving you choosing yourself to be lovable over performing for others, over being the good girl. And what if you had the good girl life, but wanted something else, wanted something different, wanted something more? Today, I'm sitting down with the incredible, amazing bestseller, author, artist, and all around soulful human, the one and only Amber Rae. And you may know her from her viral artwork on social media or her best selling book, Choose Wonder Over Worry. But today, we're diving into her most personal work yet. And this is her brand new memoir, Loveable. In this conversation, Amber opens up about what it really takes to unlearn patterns that keep us stuck and how we can move from self abandonment to self acceptance, and why embracing our full, messy, lovable selves is the bravest thing that we can do. So let's dive in with Amber Rae on the Brave Table this week. Amber, oh my goodness, Queen, what a pleasure. It's so good to see you
So
in
good to see you.
motherhood, in all of the things. I feel like the last time we had you on, we were talking about your other book, and and now you're a mama. So can we just start there?
Sure, yeah. So much has changed since I don't even know what year that was, 2018 maybe?
Yeah,
Feels like a
it
lifetime ago.
was a while ago. It was a while ago.
Yeah, mamahood. Where should I begin?
Wherever you want to start, because you were definitely living a very different life before, and you were married, and then your life had taken a different turn. And so maybe just start there, because I think for so many people, what does it mean when the good life isn't good anymore?
And yeah. So just a bit of context. It was 4 years ago while married that I looked into the eyes of a stranger and had this kind of epiphany and wake up call where I realized that A, this is what connection is actually supposed to feel like. And B, wow, I have been convincing myself that the 9 year relationship that I've been in is something different from what it actually is. And, I was married to a good man and in a seemingly good marriage, but he was my best friend and he was never my romantic partner. And, there was a lot that worked about the relationship. And because of that, and because of hope and thinking I should be more grateful and, oh, maybe we'll figure this out if we read another self help book, try another workshop, do another thing, try. I wasn't being really honest with myself about what our relationship was. But
Hmm.
it's, you bring up mamahood and it's so interesting, to be having left that marriage, having found my person, feels like, not such a word, but feels like my person. And to now have my son who just feels like, oh, this is why all of this happened. And this is
Mm,
why I lived this story.
yeah.
So now that he gets to live, his story.
Hmm.
And it's just like such proof of like, not that I needed proof, but just like this is, yeah, this is what really matters. And this is why this all happened.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. I feel like anytime we're navigating through kind of, one chapter ending and another chapter beginning. There is kind of this middle ground. And, even diving into um this, the wake up call that I feel like so many of us go through, where there is this perhaps seemingly, inevitable ending, but we know kind of maybe intuitively that this thing is going to end, or it has to end, or something is just not right, or it feels misaligned. And, you know, can you talk us into that space of, that part, the, oh my gosh, I'm going to break this person's heart, but I
Mhm.
need to actually really claim myself? Because I feel like so often, when we're brought up to be the good girls and, the caretakers and the ones that are like holding everything and everyone. And so oftentimes we, dismiss our own desires, needs, and wants. And I don't know if any of that resonates for you and if you want to speak to that.
All of that resonates for me, and yeah, it's, to hurt someone that you care about, it to me was the scariest and most terrifying thing. And so I for a long time, and none of this was super conscious until I, of course, had hindsight and was reflecting back, but I was so willing to hurt and disappoint myself so that I wouldn't hurt and disappoint, my ex-partner. And that's a friend of mine, Vienna Farron, she always says, "Sometimes the growth is in the staying and sometimes the growth is in the leaving." And for me, I've always been an overstayer.
Mm,
And that is that people pleaser, that good girl, let me try harder, let me make this work, it's figure outable. And I can just, push my needs and desires to the side in service to what this could be. And so, I did that for a very long time. And
mm,
so it's yeah, a terrifying thing to go to this person that you care about and say, "Here's the truth." And I also realized that I think the biggest growth edge for me in maybe this lifetime was learning to tolerate the discomfort of someone else being disappointed in me,
mm, yeah.
and learning
Mm,
that I'm going to have to disappoint people so
mm.
that I do not disappoint myself.
Wow. Yes, this era of disappointment. Um, for you, where did that come from? Of not wanting to, right?
Yeah, growing up, my mom had me very young. My father left. I had a shitty stepdad, so I grew up really quickly. There was, a lot of emotional unpredictability and chaos in my childhood. And so I was like, I've got it together. I'm the wise one. You can count on me. I'm reliable. All you people cannot manage your feelings, but I'm going to have it all together and not really have feelings that are going to rock the boat because I just learned very young I needed to be stable and wise and have it together.
Hmm.
And so, like, that was kind of how I showed up for the world, which was actually in some ways a really beautiful coping mechanism. It served me in my like,
Parentification served you well.
it served me well because I was always like, obstacle, I'm good. Like, let's go. You know, fires, mold, losing all of our belongings, the 9-month-old book launch. Like it's actually very helpful there because those things don't really rock me. I'm just like, all right, let's keep going. But when it comes to a romantic relationship, the person that you choose to build a life with, um, if it's like, oh, we're not intimate, we don't have sex, oh, it's okay, maybe we can, it's oh, I don't feel emotional intimacy here. It's okay, that's where it's not serving. And
Yeah.
so it's, we all have our own bag of stuff, and I really had to unpack that stuff and look more closely at where is my conditioning, sometimes actually a gift. And
Hmm.
then where is it really having me play small, having me stay stuck, having me not speak my truth, not voice my needs, not move in the direction of what is actually authentic, true, and aligned.
Yeah. And well, I mean, in writing this memoir, because it's a powerful memoir, what do you wish most or more women knew about the cost of staying in a life that looks good but feels misaligned?
Yeah, I think the cost is you. And I didn't realize that. I thought, oh, well, maybe I just can make this work and it's going to be easier to stay and more comfortable to stay.
Mm,
But, I think it's actually harder to stay in something that is so out of alignment. And so the only thing that, I want women to know that you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You don't have to
mm,
pretend your needs don't matter. You don't have to keep disappointing yourself so you don't disappoint another. And actually, the self honoring choice, though perhaps the scariest choice because it's unknown
yeah.
and we don't know what happens there. And so, of course, the fear part of our brain goes nuts. Um, but, I think that that path of liberation is going to take you places that you can't yet imagine or predict.
Mm,
And, freedom requires restraint.
mm,
And so, we always talk about being free, but in order to become free, there has to be something that we're freeing ourselves from.
mm,
And so I think if we can look at that as an invitation, as an opening, as an initiation into the wholest version of ourselves, I think it
yeah.
makes the transition a little bit less scary because we realize, oh, this is actually supposed to be scary
Yeah.
because it's novel and new and foreign. And I'm kind of unbecoming so I can become, and I'm
Mhm.
unraveling so I can ravel, and I'm deconditioning so I can rewrite the story of my life and break free from who the world has said that I need to be.
It's so huge. It's so huge. And, you talk about choosing, truth over comfort. What did that look like in real time? And even specifically of the, disappointing the other and causing that heartbreak, because I think for a lot of us women, that's what we're so afraid of is, oh my gosh, I'm going to let that person down.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest fear that they have.
Yeah. Choosing truth over comfort was a few things. It was first being honest with myself
Hmm.
because I hadn't been. And I was very much convincing myself because I needed to believe the story of what our relationship was, because that's, of course, what had me stay.
Yeah.
So I needed to believe that we were incredibly compatible and aligned and, our relationship was great and everything looked good on paper. But once I became radically honest and truthful with myself, it's like I could no longer unsee what I was seeing.
Hmm.
And, there was such a disconnect between the story of our relationship and the reality of it. And so I think, first it was like that uncomfortable conversation with self.
Yeah.
And for me, journaling is such a key practice of mine. And I lead all of these journaling workshops. And so I started asking myself the questions that I ask in these workshops, like, what truth am I afraid to admit to myself and why?
Hmm.
What's the thing I'm afraid to say out loud? And, where am I disappointing myself so I don't disappoint another? And really getting honest in that first safe space of the page and introspection, because, that's just me and the truth.
Hmm.
And I found that once I could be brave on the page, I could be more brave in real life and begin to have, that harder conversation,
Hmm.
which was what came next,
Wow.
which was, okay, I'm going to potentially break the heart of this person that I care about. But as my very dear friend Erin Claire Jones said to me when I was in the midst of it, and I called her filled with shame and freaking out and feeling awful, she was like, "Listen, Amber, liberation is a two-way street. No one wants to be in a relationship with someone who's half in, half out. And
Mm-hmm.
also, if you're self-abandoning, I imagine that he is too.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys actually both deserve more.
Mm.
You both deserve real, true love, and
Yeah.
it feels like you guys have very much been in the story of your relationship and not the reality of it. So,
Mm.
I think that was kind of helpful going in. And because my story involved me meeting someone else to have that wake up call,
Yeah.
he wasn't, blind to it because how I even met this other person was there was a potential for us to all collaborate on a project together. At this point, I was in such my like, I'm gonna figure this out 9 years in. So I'm gonna make my husband my business partner and maybe I'll finally get the closeness that I'm after. So here we are, business partners, and I'm
Oh
still
my
not
gosh.
good. I'm still not feeling that closeness or emotional intimacy. In fact, this may have actually caused us to be further apart because
Yeah.
now we're in business conversations together all the time. And, and I meet this other person, and the night that I met him, I actually turned to my ex and I said, I just met a soulmate. And,
Mm,
I wasn't thinking at that time, and now I'm going to blow up my life and um leave this. It was the connection was so undeniable that I gave voice to it right away. And he said, I know, I saw. And that was beautiful to witness. So we
mhm.
also lived this like incredibly unique story where as it was unfolding for me, I was open and transparent because I also didn't know what it meant.
Right.
And he didn't, none of us did. And so
Yeah.
we kind of like all navigated it together
Mm,
until it did come to the point of like, oh, that this is what this actually is. And now I have to have the really hard and heartbreaking conversation.
yeah.
Um, but I also trusted that it was going to be good for all of us in the end.
Mhm. And I feel like most people, you know, in that sort of situation, either, they'll go off and they'll have an affair,
Mhm.
or so they'll be ashamed, or they'll keep it hush hush, or in your case, actually have the honest and hard and difficult conversations, in a beautiful container that
Yeah.
can be wildly held. And so, was there ever any thoughts like, oh my gosh, am I going to regret what I'm doing?
I think because it happened so quickly and I was kind of so in it, I was just kind of I was like putting one honest foot in front of the other,
Yeah.
not knowing where it was going to lead. And I think my commitment was if I just speak what's true, I don't know if John, the person I had met, is a catalyst for me to step into a life that's more aligned. I don't know if he's the love of my life. All I know is that I need to finally say what's true out loud and address these conversations that we had been
Yeah.
avoiding.
Mm,
And I don't know where that's going to lead, but I trust it'll at least lead to a more honest place.
yeah.
But then there was a point where my mom actually asked me, she was like, if it doesn't work out with John, would you go back to your ex? And I was like, absolutely not. Now that I'm being honest with myself, it's like, he's my friend. Like,
Yeah.
he's more like a brother than he is a husband. Like, absolutely not. And my mom was like, pack your shit and go.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I think also to be surrounded by, folks that really support you and your light and your decision, I think that's a huge, it's also a huge factor, because I
Yeah.
think, especially in the rawness and the messiness, you know, um, of like grief and guilt and then reinventing your life. So,
Yeah.
and
And
you've
there were
been,
people who had a lot of feelings that
oh,
were
I bet.
not positive or supportive.
I bet. I bet. I bet. But at least you had like a core circle that was
Yeah.
really um rooting you on, because I can imagine there's a lot of guilt there. And so, for women who are going through that guilt of, reconciling within, of, oh my gosh, I did this thing, but it's also making me come alive.
Yeah.
And, having to rectify the truth that the life that they've been living has been misaligned. What do you say? What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's a scary thing to admit to yourself. And with it does come like shame and guilt and regret. And I think it's important to be really, compassionate with self and to be gentle with yourself because we live in a culture that tells us to stay no matter what. We live in a culture that doesn't necessarily want women in their full aliveness.
Mhm.
We live it's follow these rules, check these boxes, and sometimes we realize we've done everything we thought we were supposed to do and we've been living in the should, but that's not really, where we come alive. And so, I always say, well, congratulations, you're waking up.
Mm,
And although that's terrifying, that's a really beautiful thing.
mhm.
And so, be gentle with what's coming online, but really treat it as sacred.
Yeah.
because that is like your aliveness, your desire, your hunger, your wanting, your deepest needs. Like that's where your beauty and vitality live. And so, that might mean whether you're, and this can apply to so many things. It can be like realizing the career that we've built is not aligned, or realizing we've outgrown a friendship, or realizing that, maybe it is a relationship. And sometimes, when we realize we're not alive in a relationship, for example, our partner may be willing to meet us there and really like be in that messy space with us and actually could create a new chapter and, a deeper bond. It's, for each of us, our path is different, but I think what's most important is that we honor that sacred information that's coming online.
Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. And to give it space, let it breathe.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. So, you know, leaving like your old life is one thing, but stepping into a new one obviously takes so much courage and so much inner trust and the right set of folks that are going to usher you in. Was there a part or an identity that you had to grieve and let go?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that what's coming up for me, and you asking that question, is that when I left my marriage and was beginning this new life, I kind of was like, oh, I've done so much work. I've
Mhm.
processed so much of this. Like it's kind of going to be easy breezy from here. And that act of leaving and that self-honoring choice felt like in some ways I kind of blew up the good girl harmony myth. And
Mhm.
I finally was like, all right, I've said goodbye to harmony. I'm choosing myself. I'm disappointing people. I've learned that disappointing others is kind of a skill and a way that is something that is necessary on the path of like authenticity and truth. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath here. And I think what I wasn't prepared for was the realization that why I had chosen that 9-year relationship was really from a place of safety and um, avoiding the wounds of my past, because I chose that marriage so that I wouldn't have to feel the abandonment fears again, like I did as a little girl. Like all of the reasons why, like kind of asking the question of like, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
As I began unpacking that question, I realized that I had, intellectually understood my trauma, but not necessarily somatically processed it.
Yeah.
And so I think I had to grieve the fact that like I had it figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I'm like, oh boy. Oh boy, I thought I did the hard thing. Actually, the harder thing is like this process of kind of coming home to self and
Yeah.
realizing it wasn't about the old guy or the new guy, but it was actually about me.
Right.
And that I was gonna have to like really, yeah, how did I get here? And how do I not repeat these patterns? And whoa, intimacy is actually very scary. And so of course I chose that. And here I am 9 years out of a, basically a sexless marriage, feeling incredibly disconnected from that part of myself. And now so insecure.
Mhm.
And like, wow, I didn't realize these like I feel like a 16-year-old girl again. So it's just like feeling I had to grieve the, like, who I thought I was and be honest about, like, what I really need the work I really needed to do.
Yeah, I think that's huge because in so much of what you're sharing, I'm like, yep, I totally get it. When I broke the good girl harmony myth too a long time ago
Yeah.
after my first marriage, the part that I think people, fail to recognize is it is that coming home to yourself. And however way you get there, for you it was, another person shining the light and showing you, hey, being that mirror for you to say, okay,
Mhm.
is this who you really are? And I feel like a lot of times, there are people, circumstances, angels that come into the form of your life and or obstacles or even careers that kind of reflect that to say, okay, are you going to choose yourself?
Mhm.
Is this going to be that next calling? For anybody that feels guilt and the
Yeah.
emotion of guilt, eh, how do we unpack that?
Yeah, I'm curious with guilt. Guilt is such a unique one because guilt is often passed along from societal expectations. So a
Mhm.
lot of times our guilt doesn't belong to us.
Mm,
Guilt, what is guilt? Guilt is I did something that I regret. And now I want to guilt comes up because it's like, oh, we have an opportunity to make amends, to apologize, to take responsibility, to own what's ours. That's where guilt is actually really useful. And, there was actually guilt for me and I in post marriage. And then my ex and I had a few conversations with each other where we had to own, oh, that happened really fast. And I understand, I really feel bad that I hurt you. And he's like, yeah, and I understand how I was checked out in the sleeping bit. Like we each, had to kind of I think there was guilt for both of us, and that was an invitation, own your part. But then there's the guilt of like, you're a bad girl because
the
you
bad
did
girl.
the
Yeah.
bad girl, because you did something that like goes against what society says you should do. And so
Mhm.
I think it's really important to separate what is the guilt that is an opportunity to take responsibility and own
Mhm.
something, and what is the guilt that's actually not mine and, maybe has been passed down through society, through who women are supposed to be, that I am going to say, hey, I see you, but I'm not taking this on.
Right.
And I think it's really important to distinguish between the two and to like become more nuanced also about your story. So, like,
Mhm.
let's say, whether it's like, just using the example of like, I want to leave or end a marriage,
Yeah.
the guilt might be, how could I do that? I made a vow.
Mhm.
And, I think the nuance is like, yes, at one point I made a vow because that's what I believed to be right and true for me. But also, I'm allowed to expand and grow. And sometimes growth means growing together, and sometimes growth means growing apart. And so I
Yeah.
think we have to get a little bit more nuanced with ourselves and know that also, like, we're not trying to cause harm.
Mhm.
We're trying to live honest lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's going to be hurt feelings in that.
Right. Right. And I think to normalize that, you know,
Yeah.
that there that that there is going to be that, but at the end of the day, you're really stepping more into the most clear version of yourself. Um, so beautiful. I think that, I think a lot of times we surprise ourselves when we're kind of coming into our next like reinvention or when we're leaving a chapter. Was there anything that surprised you most about, leaving or just stepping into this bold version of yourself?
Yeah. I think one thing that really surprised me is that when, it was so hard to have the conversations around the leaving and the, oh no, I'm going to hurt. But when it came down to it and that closing conversation happened and we said goodbye, I was surprised that I was filled with more relief than grief.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is that I had been grieving the relationship for a long
Yeah.
time. And I had been grieving it while I was in it. And I bring this up because I talk to so many women. And
Mm-hmm.
when I say this, they're like, oh my God, that's what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have already actually felt my anger and sadness and frustration and the disconnection and the numbness and all of that. And when the moment finally came, it was like, woof, I finally honored myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that part, like I thought the hardest part was like leading up to the goodbye conversation.
Mm,
But then once the conversation happened, that's when it was like, okay, I did the hard but right thing.
yeah.
And it actually felt relieving.
Mm. So let's talk about this new book because you have been a writer for a very long time. Loveable, a memoir. So tell us about, how did it all come about and how is this different from all the other books that you've written?
I mean, so it's a memoir one. I've always written kind of self-help, mind, body, spirit books. And a memoir is one story told, and it doesn't, I'm not giving the reader advice. I'm not asking them reflection questions. I'm not. turning every essay around and giving them an invitation. And all of that is good and well. But for me, I've always been most moved by women telling their stories and me being able to find what speaks to me in that, and instead of being told what action steps I need to take, I want to find my own action step in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's what's moved me as a reader. And so now to be able to write a story in that way, I think was, the most exciting invitation for me as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, I think it's the most honest. I think it's has the most depth. I think it's also the most like entertaining story because I just happen to live like a wild story. That as a memoirist, I was stoked I got to write it. And so, I think the book is designed to like entertain, but also to, in it, of course, my editor calls it a teachable memoir because of course
Mm.
there's so many opportunities for the reader to reflect inwardly as they're
Yeah.
reading it.
Was
Um,
it, I mean, was it hard for you because you have only been, a personal growth writer from like your posts way back in the day and all of the, the illustrations that you've literally paired um in really being able to break concepts and even emotions down. So was there any edge of you that was like, okay, I need to supplement this with graphics and things like that?
I think those were always the accessory to my writing. Even my first book, Choose Wonder Over Worry, was very like memoir, personal, narrative
Hmm.
driven. And so I think that was always the most like honest way of writing for me. And then I felt like I had to do everything else because
Hmm.
that's what you had to do in order to have your work stand out. And of course, like it's I don't think I could have with my first book gone to a publisher and been like, I want to write a memoir. And they'd be like, who are you? Why do we care about your story?
Hmm.
But I think what came up for me in writing the book was like, am I a good enough writer to do memoir justice?
Yeah.
Because all of those other things, make me feel useful as a writer if I'm
Hmm.
giving reflection prompts
Sure.
and advice and all of that. And so really leaning into, no, this story matters and this story is worth telling and this story is going to inspire and guide readers is something that I had to keep trusting while I was writing it.
Mm. And I want to kind of double click on to, like the other side of the unraveling, which is the homecoming that
Hmm.
kind of alluded to, that we have to, unravel before we ravel and rewrite our narratives. And so this new narrative, this new side, this motherhood journey of yours, 9 months in, you've said before that self-worth isn't something that we achieve, but it's something we remember. How are you remembering yours differently now?
Yeah, I think I've actually separated achievement from my self-worth, where I feel like in the past it was very much those two things were so interwoven.
Hmm.
And I think, these days, all I'm doing is speaking my truth.
Hmm.
And and I'm trusting that that's enough. And it's not coming from a place of I need to get here in order to be worthy enough. It's coming from a place of this is what I have to say because this is what I know to be true. So I feel like the come from is different
Yeah.
and it's just kind of it's like a settled place to be.
Hmm.
I think of the launch of my first book. I was a mess. I was a stress case. I had to, you know, get XYZ done. And of course, I'm in this season of motherhood where I don't have time to think about all those things. I have like 3 hours a day to like do what I can do, and that's become enough. But, I think it's just knowing that like my worth isn't dependent on anything.
Mm.
My worth is. And because of that, it's just allowed so much more creativity and self-expression and beauty to come through me because it's just coming through and that is enough. That is the
Mm.
gift.
And what do you say to women watching this or listening to this that are still kind of, the doing, the performing, the
Mhm.
performative? And how do they get to kind of go from the performative to the presence, that
Yeah.
side of their homecoming?
Yeah. Well, I think it's first just, awareness of it. Because I performed for a very long time. And the funny thing about performing is that you don't know you're performing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I like look back to, and I have a chapter of this like early in the book, the wedding. I walked down the aisle thinking, I don't know how long this is going to last. But then I put on a hell of a performance. Like, I mean, we had camels and everything. And it was like, and so I look back and I'm like, wow, like, but I had no idea I was performing. I like thought I was being authentic. And so I think, if you're realizing if like perhaps listening to this conversation had you being like, oof, I'm very much in the performing and the doing. I want to say like sit with that. Like the fact that
Mhm.
you're owning that is huge. And like how do you move into the present? It's as small as the next walk you take, feel your feet connect to the earth. Like notice the elements, feel the breeze. Like present comes in those tiny moments with self. And then it comes with acknowledging, okay, and unpacking why am I performing? And,
Mhm.
where did this come from? And oftentimes it's, a survival and a coping mechanism. So
Mhm.
what is that about for you?
Yeah.
For me, I performed because I thought that's how I would get love.
Mhm.
And so realizing that, like, for me, I had to learn, like, yeah, maybe I'm getting love, but the love I'm not getting is the love from myself because I'm actually, this path that I'm walking doesn't feel right or true. And so I might be filling a void in all of these other places, but I'm not filling it up, you know, from myself
Yeah.
and learning to untangle the two.
Oof. The untanglement, that's a big one. It's a
Yeah.
big one. And so, what can we expect from this amazing Wildly You memoir? I'm so excited for it. It's
Yeah.
already out by the time this releases, so you can actually get it where books are sold. And we're
Yeah.
going to
Well, I
link it
mean,
also in the show notes. But
thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, I mean, the book tells the story of leaving that marriage, but it also talks about, what comes next, which is really that reckoning and that homecoming, that reckoning with my conditioning, with, what I believed about love and loyalty and who I needed to be loved. And I think it
Mm,
offers, a journey for readers to see themselves in that story. And, if self-abandonment has kind of been what you've known, it will definitely help light the way to self-liberation.
ooh, yeah, that's a big one. So, if somebody is sitting on the edge of a big, brave decision, but frozen in doubt, what's one question that you'd want them to ask themselves?
I would actually invite them to dialogue with that doubt and fear. This is one of my favorite practices. So I would invite you to ask doubt or ask fear what it is they want you to know and
Mm,
what they're trying to protect you from.
mm.
And then I would invite you to ask courage what it is that courage wants you to know and how courage might be able to help you.
So good. So good, Amber. So good. Oh my goodness. And I know that motherhood is mothering. What has been this season and chapter for you now with beautiful baby boy, and
Yeah.
this is your life now?
Yeah, it's just it's everything. It's, like the most love that I didn't know I could feel or touch. It I feel like I'm now my work is like really fully my truth. There's
Mm,
no part of the work that I'm doing that I don't want to be doing. It's all feel aligned and right and true. And, to be doing that while raising my son feels like such a gift because it's just those 2 things feel very honest, and I feel like me as, like I'm so many women I speak to and mothers I speak to are afraid to lose their identity
mhm.
when they become mothers. I just so happened to, get edits from my publisher back when I was 6 weeks postpartum that I needed to have back to them in 3 weeks. And, like, I thought that was awful and going to tear me down, but, like, here I was at 2 AM with my son asleep. And I'm like editing an essay, and actually it was invigorating and helped me feel very connected to my purpose and my creativity. And so I've
Yeah.
actually found those two things to like they fuel each other
And
and
interweave.
fuel they interweave. Like I feel resourced, I feel fueled by my work, and I'm able to bring so much more to motherhood.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's been this like it doesn't even feel like a balancing act. It's just kind of like it's just
Ugh.
I'm just doing it.
You're doing it. You're doing it. So as we segue into our spill the chai section, our little rapid fire, what's a practice or a ritual that keeps you anchored in truth currently?
I'm not journaling right now because I don't have time.
I figured that when I was going to ask you about that.
I'm like, so what is my practice? Yeah, it's interesting. I like it's a season of I don't really have personal practices right now, as crazy as that
Yeah.
seems. Like I'm
Yeah.
momming and I'm creating.
Yeah.
And actually, the personal practice is discernment.
Mm,
And so the practice is this worthy of my energy and time? And I
that's a
think
big
I've
one.
become really good at answering that question. And whether that's like stress is actually not worthy of my energy and time. Like I don't have time to worry about how this book is doing. I'm just showing up and doing it, you know?
Showing up. I know.
Like if someone is not aligned or is not resonant, it's just like it's a much easier yes, no these days because the constraint of time.
Mhm.
So I'd say my biggest personal practice right now is discernment.
Yeah. And what are you braving currently?
I think it's a whole new chapter of relationship to
Mm,
be, moving from like lovers and partners to co-parents.
yeah.
And suddenly, like, it's almost like you're like suddenly co-founders in this like baby. And all of these ways that you did not have to logistically communicate, and all these ways that you did not have to be on the same page and negotiate and make sure like you agreed with the like way of raising this. Like, it's a whole new thing and it leads to tough conversation. And so I think I'm braving this like new chapter of what love is and
Mm,
in a season of like raising a child together and everything that
yeah.
comes with that.
Yeah. So then what would you say your word for this season is?
My word for this season is truth.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Amber Rae, always a ray of light and wisdom and potent magical power. And I can't wait for everybody to get your book. Loveable. I think it's the book that I feel like so many of us really need and yearn for. And we sometimes, look for it outside of ourselves, but you have been the person that has been that guiding wisdom and light to remind us that it's always within ourselves. So,
Beautiful. Thank you.
and let us know where we can follow you, where we can get more access to the workshops and everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, Loveable is available everywhere books are sold. And you can follow me on Instagram, Hey Amber Rae. My website, amberrae.com, has the book, all my books, offerings. I teach writing workshops. I'll probably do one at some point post book. But yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Amazing. Amber, it was so good to see you, and I'm excited about this era of life for you.
Thank you.
Fully unleashed and
Fully unleashed.
loved and mama. Love it.
Yes. Thank you.
Whew. Okay. Wow. We are back on the other side. Amber was such a ray of light and sunshine, as she always is. Her journey, her honesty, and I feel like it invites the rest of us to look at the parts of ourselves that we've been too scared to name. And I really love that, in one of her prompts, she said, if you're struggling or reckoning with fear or doubt, what does fear or doubt, what are they protecting you of? And what does courage want you to know? So I hope this lands to whoever's listening, whoever's watching this on YouTube. Maybe you are in a season of grief. Maybe you are in a season of reclaiming parts of you. Maybe you are in a season of questioning the life you once begged for. wherever you are, I really hope that this episode reminds you that it's never too late to choose you, even at the expense of disappointing other people. And I think, in this past season of recognizing and realizing that, when we abandon ourselves to please other people, we're continuing that cycle and we're continuing to do that more and more. And so I hope that, in the disappointment of others, you find the ability to actually love yourself and choose yourself in the process and choosing that truth, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. So go grab Loveable where books are sold and follow Amber at Hey Amber Rae. And don't forget to share your biggest takeaway here in the comments. Go ahead and give us a subscribe, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to be just a little bit more brave.
You know I've got so much more in store for you. So if you are really ready to dive in and keep owning your emotions like the boss that you are, click right here. Go ahead, don't be shy. I'll see you in the next one. Keep shining.